I had been counting down the days to my son's birthday for months. He was turning 16, and in our family, 16 was a milestone especially for him. I knew how much he had been dreaming about getting a car, even if it was just a modest one. He wasn't spoiled. He was responsible and mature for his age. He had been saving his allowance and doing extra chores for the past year, hoping he could contribute toward the car himself. I wanted this birthday to be special for him, a reward for his hard work and patience, especially given the complicated family situation we were living through. My ex-husband and I had split amicably at first, or at least I had thought so. But over the years, the communication between us had deteriorated, and every decision regarding our son had become a negotiation, a battle of wills masked as co-parenting. I tried my best to shield our son from the tension, but sometimes, like now, the truth of the fractured relationship surfaced at the worst possible moments. Weeks before his birthday, my ex had called me. "I want to get him something he'll never forget," he said. I assumed he meant thoughtful gifts, but then he added, almost casually, "I'm thinking of getting him a car. You know, to celebrate turning 16. My stomach dropped. I knew a car wasn't cheap, and I had already been planning a different surprise, a weekend trip, small but meaningful. I didn't say much at the time, just thanked him, not wanting to start a conflict. I assumed he was serious. After all, our son had been hinting at this for months, and it was clear he had no idea how complicated his father's finances were. As the days passed, I noticed the excitement in my son's eyes. He talked endlessly about the car, about what color he wanted, how he would decorate the interior, the music he would play on the stereo. I felt a pang of worry. What if my ex couldn't follow through? I considered talking to him, but I didn't want to ruin the surprise. I wanted my son to experience the joy, not the disappointment that so often marked our family events. Then, 2 days before his birthday, my ex called me. The voice on the phone was unusually tense. "Something came up," he said. "I can't get the car. There were unexpected expenses. I know we talked about it, but I can't do it right now." I felt my chest tighten, the anger rising first, then a wave of sadness that I tried to suppress. My son had been counting on this. He had been building dreams around a car that now wouldn't exist. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking. "He's been waiting for months. He's been talking about this nonstop." "I'm sorry," he said, almost mechanically. "I didn't think it would matter if I mentioned it earlier. We can figure something out." I ended the call, feeling both furious and helpless. I knew there was no way to make this right without my son noticing the change, without him realizing that his father had let him down in the worst possible way. I stared at the calendar, counting down the hours until his birthday, trying to think of a way to salvage the celebration. I couldn't let my son feel disappointment so deep, not on his special day. I had to think fast. I started calling dealerships, looking for small, affordable cars that I could buy outright or finance quickly. I called friends who had connections in the auto industry, anyone who could help me find a solution at the last minute. The clock was ticking, and every phone call felt like a race against time. Meanwhile, I tried to act normal around my son. I couldn't let him see my panic, my frustration at his father. I smiled, asked about his plans, played along as if nothing had changed. I watched him talk about the car he thought he would get, imagining the feeling of finally driving his own vehicle. My heart ached. Finally, on the morning of his birthday, a small miracle happened. A friend of mine, someone who owed me favors from years of helping out, called me. "I heard about your situation," they said. "I can get a car for your son. It's not brand new, but it's reliable, and I can deliver it today." I couldn't believe it. Relief washed over me, mixed with gratitude and exhaustion. I coordinated with them, arranged a time for the delivery, and tried to keep my son distracted until the surprise arrived. When the car pulled into our driveway, my son's face lit up in a way that made all the stress worth it. He ran outside, screaming with excitement, jumping up and down, hugging me tightly. I felt tears sting my eyes. I had saved the day, even if it had taken every ounce of energy I had. Later, when his father called to check in, I held my tongue. I didn't tell him what had happened, how I had fixed everything, how I had prevented our son from experiencing heartbreak. I just smiled and said, "He's happy." That's what matters. That day, I realized two things. First, being a parent means sometimes stepping in when others fail to show up. And second, the promises of someone who has repeatedly let you down are never enough. You have to be prepared to take action yourself. Our son's birthday ended up being one of the happiest days I had ever seen him have. He didn't know about the disappointment he had narrowly avoided. He only knew the joy, the thrill of getting something he had wanted for so long. And in that moment, I felt both the pain of dealing with a negligent ex and the satisfaction of knowing I had done right by my son when it mattered most. The lesson was clear: life doesn't always go as planned, and people may fail you when you least expect it, but the love you have for your children will drive you to do whatever it takes, no matter how impossible it seems. And sometimes, that love can turn even the worst circumstances into a memory that lasts a lifetime. After the initial joy of the car surprise, life settled back into our usual rhythm, but the tension between me and my ex lingered like a shadow. Every phone call, every interaction reminded me that trust was fragile, and that relying on him to keep promises was a gamble my son couldn't afford. I made a silent vow to myself: from now on, I would be the one to ensure my son's happiness, no matter what his father said or did. Over the next few days, our son drove around the neighborhood with his friends, proudly showing off the car. I watched from the porch, a mixture of pride and lingering resentment in my chest. He didn't see the panic I had endured to make it happen, the phone calls that ran late into the night, the anxiety that had threatened to overwhelm me. He only saw the result. That was exactly how it should be. A week later, the fallout began. My ex called, trying to act casual, as if nothing had happened. "I heard he got a car. Glad he's happy," he said. His voice carried a hint of defensiveness, and I knew he was fishing for an apology or, worse, some admission of weakness. I stayed calm, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, he's very happy. That's all that matters to me." He didn't push further, but I could feel the tension in his silence. I knew he was simmering with frustration that his attempt to impress our son had been overshadowed, even though he had failed to deliver. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. I had won this battle silently, without drama, and for my son's sake. But life rarely stays simple. Over the next few months, my ex tried to regain influence over our son by promising him trips, gadgets, and other luxuries. I tried to remain neutral, letting our son decide without interference. But each time he mentioned something, I reminded him gently of the limits, teaching him patience and responsibility. I wanted him to understand that true value came not from what was promised, but from what people actually did. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between our son and his father that shook me. My ex was subtly criticizing me, suggesting that I had spoiled him with the car, implying that my generosity was a weakness. I felt my anger rise, but I swallowed it. My son needed guidance, not a spectacle of adult conflict. Later, I explained to him the importance of discernment, how to appreciate kindness without letting others manipulate him. It was a delicate balance, teaching him to navigate both love and disappointment. As the year went on, the car became a symbol not just of my son's freedom, but of my resilience as a parent. Every time I saw him driving responsibly, I felt the quiet pride of knowing that I had stepped up when it mattered most. My ex's failures didn't define me, my actions did. Then came another challenge. Our son's friends started comparing their parents, their gifts, and their privileges. Some of them had fathers who bought them luxury cars or lavish vacations without effort. I could see the envy creeping into his eyes, subtle but present. One evening, he asked me directly, "Mom, why doesn't Dad ever do things for me like other dads do?" I took a deep breath and held his gaze. Sometimes, people make promises they can't keep. That doesn't mean they don't care, but it does mean we can't rely on them to give us everything we want. What matters is that we recognize love in the people who are actually there for us, and that we take responsibility for our own happiness. He nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. It wasn't a perfect explanation, but it was enough to help him navigate the complicated emotions of adolescence and fractured family dynamics. Months later, we celebrated his 17th birthday. This time, I planned a smaller, meaningful event, friends, family, and memories rather than expensive gifts. He was genuinely happy. Not just because of what he received, but because he felt seen and supported. I realized then that the lessons of the previous year, the disappointment, the rescue, the perseverance had shaped him in ways no car ever could. My ex, meanwhile, continued his pattern of erratic behavior, making grand promises and failing to follow through. But I had changed. I no longer let his actions dictate my emotions or my decisions. I focused on the people who mattered, my son, my family, and my own integrity. Looking back, I understood that the ruined birthday and the last-minute scramble for a car were more than just challenges, they were turning points. They taught me resilience, the importance of proactive parenting, and the necessity of keeping promises. Most importantly, they taught my son that while people may disappoint, love and determination can overcome almost anything. By the time our son was ready to drive on his own, the car had become more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of perseverance, sacrifice, and unwavering support. Each ride reminded him, and me, that while we can't always control the actions of others, we can control how we respond. And in that lesson, I found peace. I had saved a birthday, nurtured a young heart, and, more importantly, set an example of responsibility, love, and resilience that my son would carry with him long after the car itself became just another object in his life. After his birthday, life settled into a new rhythm. But I could sense the subtle tension whenever my ex appeared in our lives. He had started trying to control situations indirectly, leaving unexpected gifts or dropping hints that he had done more than I had for our son. At first, I ignored it, but it became impossible to overlook when our son began questioning the disparity between what I promised and what his father seemed to offer. One evening, after school, my son came home visibly upset. He threw his backpack onto the couch and collapsed beside me. "Mom," he said, voice tight, "why does Dad make these promises to me and then back out? And why do other kids' parents do all these fun things?" I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar surge of anger and protective instinct. But instead of lashing out, I pulled him into a hug and whispered, "You know, people make mistakes. Sometimes they don't follow through. That doesn't mean you're not loved. It means we need to focus on what we can control." We spent hours talking that night, and I realized how much my son had internalized the disappointments. It wasn't just about broken promises, it was about feeling undervalued and unseen by his own father. I made a mental note. I would have to do more than buy gifts or plan surprises. I needed to reinforce his sense of worth and belonging through presence, guidance, and attention. In the weeks that followed, I doubled my efforts. We began taking small trips together, hiking in the hills near our town, visiting museums, and attending local events. Nothing extravagant, just quality time where I could engage with him fully, listening to his thoughts, encouraging his dreams, and guiding him through the complexities of adolescence. Slowly, I saw a change in him. He smiled more easily, shared his worries, and even started opening up about his frustrations with his father. Then came the inevitable confrontation. My ex decided to assert his parental authority in a public way. He took our son to a soccer tournament without informing me properly, assuming I would react emotionally. When I found out, I drove to the venue, keeping my cool, but inside I was boiling. I arrived to find him smirking, expecting me to explode. I took a deep breath and calmly addressed the situation. "He's coming with us after the game," I said, gently but firmly. "I know you wanted him for the afternoon, but he's my responsibility too, and we'll communicate about plans next time." His smirk faltered. For the first time in a long time, I saw that my steady composure had shifted the dynamic. I wasn't fighting with him, I was asserting my role as a parent without anger, without theatrics. Our son looked between us, clearly relieved that the situation was being handled without chaos. Over the next year, I continued to build a life that prioritized stability, love, and integrity over material gestures. My son thrived academically and socially, and I could see him growing into a confident, resilient young man. Meanwhile, my ex's attempts to manipulate through promises and gifts became increasingly transparent and ineffective. One evening, as we were driving home from a weekend camping trip, my son spoke up. "Mom, I know Dad messes up a lot, but I want you to know I don't feel bad about what you do for me. You make me feel loved every day, and I really appreciate it." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held them back, focusing on his words. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me. Remember, it's not about what others promise, it's about who's actually there, supporting you when it matters." It was in that moment I realized something crucial. The car, the gifts, the birthday scramble, they were just symbols. The real impact came from consistency, presence, and emotional support. I had fought countless small battles, navigated hurtful disappointments, and endured sleepless nights, but the reward was clear in my son's trust and confidence. Months later, on the anniversary of the car incident, we joked about how far we'd come. "Remember Dad's last-minute cancellation?" I asked, laughing softly. He laughed too, but with a maturity that reflected how much he had grown. "Yeah, but it doesn't matter anymore. You always come through for me." I realized then that my role wasn't to compete with his father, it was to provide an unshakable foundation, one built not on promises but on actions and love. The car had been a catalyst, but the real journey was shaping my son into someone who could navigate disappointment with grace, value relationships authentically, and understand the difference between intent and reality. As I watched him drift off to sleep that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The challenges weren't over. There would always be conflicts, unmet expectations, and moments of frustration. But for the first time, I felt truly confident in my ability to guide him through life, equipped with lessons of resilience, empathy, and unwavering commitment. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I understood that while I couldn't control my ex or his actions, I could control the love and guidance I gave my son. That was the true victory, the kind that no last-minute promises, material gifts, or parental showmanship could ever overshadow. Over the next few months, life kept testing our resilience. My ex started a subtle campaign of undermining me in front of our son, making sarcastic remarks, or implying that I wasn't as fun or cool as he was. At first, it stung seeing him try to manipulate my child's perception of me was infuriating. But I learned to respond differently. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply listened to my son, validated his feelings, and calmly explained that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes or act unfairly. But that didn't change the truth about how much I loved him and cared for him. One weekend, my son had a soccer tournament. My ex promised to attend, but texted last minute saying he couldn't make it because of work emergencies. Normally, I would have felt a pang of frustration, but instead, I used it as a teaching moment. "See, sometimes people let us down," I said to my son, "but what matters is how we handle it. We show up for the people we care about, even when it's hard." We cheered for his team, laughed, and celebrated small victories together. The disappointment of my ex's absence faded quickly, replaced by the joy of presence, attention, and shared experience. Soon after, I noticed subtle changes in my son's behavior. He began speaking up when he felt someone was being unfair, advocating for himself at school, and demonstrating empathy toward friends who were struggling. It struck me that these lessons weren't just about coping with a neglectful parent, they were about resilience, integrity, and self-worth. The car incident, the broken promises, the frustration, it had all become part of a larger framework teaching him how to navigate life. Then came a moment I hadn't anticipated. My ex approached me one afternoon, asking to speak privately. I braced myself, expecting conflict. Instead, he spoke quietly, almost awkwardly. "I see how much he looks up to you. I can't change the past, but I want to support him better moving forward." I studied him carefully, and sure if he was genuine. Support him, I said carefully, means showing up when you say you will, being honest, and respecting his feelings, not buying his love with gifts or promises. He nodded, and surprisingly, he followed through. Over the next several months, I noticed small but meaningful improvements. He started attending events he had promised to before, communicated more honestly, and treated our son's milestones with appropriate care. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Meanwhile, my son and I continued to build a life filled with shared adventures, quiet evenings reading together, and weekend rituals that created memories independent of his father. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and achievements in ways that reflected our bond, not anyone else's expectations. I learned that love and attention mattered far more than material gestures, and that presence, consistency, and emotional availability were priceless. Years later, when my son prepared for high school graduation, he gave a speech that made my heart ache with pride. He spoke of resilience, love, and family. He mentioned how setbacks and disappointments had shaped him and praised the unwavering support I had provided. Some people may fail to keep promises, he said, voice steady and confident, but my mom never did. She taught me how to trust, how to persevere, and how to be kind even when life isn't fair. I sat there, holding back tears, realizing that every small struggle, every late night worry, and every moment of frustration had been worth it. The birthday car fiasco, once a symbol of failure, had become the starting point for something far more meaningful, teaching my son the importance of integrity, empathy, and resilience. Even now, when memories of broken promises or unfair treatment surface, I remind myself that our lives are built not on fleeting gestures but on enduring love, consistent effort, and shared growth. My son carries these lessons into the world every day, and I feel an overwhelming sense of fulfillment knowing that the love I invested in him has become a guiding force for his life. In the end, I realized that control over external events, my ex's choices, society's expectations, or material gifts was an illusion. The only true power lies in our ability to respond with integrity, compassion, and dedication. That understanding reshaped my life, strengthened my bond with my son, and created a legacy far greater than any car or birthday gift could ever symbolize.